Hello my fellow hunters with Great Goldrus in the game. I think it's safe to say that Goat Queen is the best fight of her type, and I think it would be hard to argue otherwise. And you may be asking, well, what's her type? And to that I'd say, why do you want to know? Clearly she's not single. No, I would wager that she falls into the same category that a select few monsters from the past have. That is to say, a more cinematic, scripted type fight that feels more like a full-on, event than just a simple go hunt the creature. Normally containing a stage where they mostly ignore you, ergo stage 1 in her case, while you whittle them away, you anger them enough, and eventually they fight you personally in a kinda cool final stand, which is stage 2, 3, and 4 for her. She has a lot more going on across all of it that we'll talk about later on, but for now, she does belong to a very special few monsters that are kind of divisive. A lot of people love them, a lot of people are like, ah. So let's look at the titanic creatures that pave the way for our golden goddess. So if we go back in time, all the way back. Alright, well that's ridiculous. Come on, that's just ridiculous. Like, there we go. So, Monster Hunter 1 Lao Shan Lung, a ginormous elder dragon who at the time and for a fair while held the title of largest monster in the game. He is the mountain dragon. He feeds off minerals and he looks kind of traditionally dragony, right? He's got the face for it, although no wings, and he crawls along the ground a little bit too ungracefully to be a proper dragon, but elder dragon he is, and his fight is essentially he is running from Fatalis, who I talked about in my Black Dragons video. Oh, wink wink, you should totally check that out. And he is trying to just desperately get away, but the thing is, something that large getting away and not really caring about where it's going means that it might try and trample over something that the humans care about. So, a fortress was built in the mountains to contain the monster, to hold it there, lest it go rampaging around civilized areas. And you, as the hunter, just have to stab it while it ignores you and slowly moves down this mountain path. If you do enough stabby while it ignores you, it will fuck off. There is a subspecies, the Ashen Lao Shan Lung, because it lives in volcanic regions and the ash in the air has changed its scales to a grey colour, but really, the creature is so docile that it just ignores the hunters desperately trying to kill it as it flees and tries to break through the fortress. The only real danger in the fight, and I'm not even exaggerating for a fact, the danger is don't get accidentally stepped on. Looking back, it really is hard to not be like, oh god, why did we find that fun? But the thing is, it was the first time this had happened, knowing that if we didn't stop this thing, it was going to break through and completely wipe out a village in its attempt to escape. That kind of lent to some urgency, right? It was really built up as this serious, holy shit, this is a bad thing that's happening, please stop the mountain dragon. And talking of mountain, it was the first time you could jump on top of its back. Mounting. Come on, that was alright, shut up. And that was fantastic, actually being on top of a monster, riding it before that was even a mechanic, placing anti-dragon bombs on its back. It had its moments, but it certainly wasn't anything crazy. Granted, in Monster Hunter Double Cross, they did make it a bit more fighty, it actually attacks you, but really it's docile, huge dragon walks away while you try and poke it to death with what to it is a toothpick. Oh, and this is the monster whose armor the recent layered armor is actually based on. If we have a look at the armor from back in the day, it very much has that look to it. So it's kind of a nice little homage and further proof that Kulve Taroth really is a fight of the same vein. That's why stuff like Dah'ren Mohran and for the love of Gog, if people are like, where's Gog Mazios? I love Gogmazioth. I do. He's like honestly one of my favorites. I think he's incredible. But I don't think I have to explain why those two aren't, well, these kinds of fight, right? It's just not the same tone, not the same feeling, not the same flow. It might be arguable that it's intangible and I'm making a weird distinction, but I feel like for everyone who's experienced them, it's a fair thing to say. So, moving on to the second generation, we have ourselves Yama Tsuki. And I'm on the fence as to whether I even mentioned him. I think he kind of qualifies as per my criteria, but at the same time, how often do you get to talk about floating octopus mountain dragon? Yep. I don't know. He is a graceful creature, incredibly rare. He has a symbiotic relationship with thunderbugs, which are insects that shock you. I know. They grow up from larvae inside his mouth. By the way, his mouth... Hi! Yep. And then they will attack his enemies when he lets them out. And he has, like, wind vortex, Kirby-esque attacks. He Beyblades round the platform with his tentacles. He's a interesting fellow, and I feel like the less focused on Yama Tsuki, the better. Honestly, I don't have a great memory of him. He's probably one of my most, like, monsters of all of them, so please, someone regale us with tales of Yama Tsuki. I've certainly never farmed him or anything of that status, so I just wanted to bring him up. Okay, cool. Next up then we have Shen Gaoren, who I absolutely adore. Now, essentially Shen Gaoren is just Lao Shan Lung, but it's a giant crab. And honestly, I think I can speak for all of us who have played the previous games with them in. We dearly miss the giant enemy crabs in Monster Hunter World. They'd be so amazing realized in World's beautifulness. But Shen Gaoren is the giantest of all the giant crabs. Indeed, he's a hermit crab that uses the skull of Lao Shan Lung as his home, and he is tall, bearing similarities to Japanese spider crabs, of which he is loosely based, and he essentially is walking through the same canyon that Lao Shan Lung was, and you've got to stop him from breaking through the fortress. He wasn't crazy different outside of it's a crab. You beat on his feet until you damage them all enough that he falls down, then you beat on his face. You can go up on ledges to get more towards his face. If you have a ranged weapon, there's the siege weapons. Still not developed left and right technology, but that's absolutely fine. Look, there's not a lot to add to him, because he really just is Lao Shan Lung, but a crab. It attacks the players more, its pincers are capable of slicing through rock, it can fire a massive glob of acid that melts armor out the mouth of the skull on its back, which is pretty damn cool, and yeah, he's not the most interesting fight, but I do love him for being just a giant fuck-off crab. I mean, that's kinda cool, right? So, we move to the third generation and things, you know, kick up a notch. Underwater combat, for better or for worse, Look, I didn't enjoy it, but I do think they could do it probably well enough to be fun in world. I think they could. I don't know, maybe this is a calm down Satan moment, but I think. But either way, we move to underwater combat, and we have an underwater leviathan of ginormous proportions by the name of Cadiz. Ceadeus? Ceadeus? It's Cadiz, right? I feel like I'm gonna have really upset some people. And he's essentially a giant whale, but monsterfied, and he is an incredibly beautiful, graceful creature. He has a huge beard where he cultivates bioluminescent algae that he has a symbiotic relationship with. He lets them thrive in his beard, and in exchange, well, they glow and let him actually see what the hell he's doing, because they are incredibly rare. They live in deep, deep ocean, so it was a big deal story-wise that we had a Ceadeus to to fight. And the issue was he came to the surface and was butting his huge, overgrown right horn against the side of the rock underwater and causing earthquakes that threatened to destroy Moga Village, which was where you were hunting from in the game. And obviously we can't have that, so we went down there, gave him a little bit of a spanking and sliced off the big horn, and it was a very satisfying horn slice. Honestly, it was the most satisfying horn slice ever, at least until Kulve Taroth, so really we got that going for him. He had an incredible theme. And is one of the few monsters able to inflict Dragon Blight, which is quite cool. But yeah, he is an incredibly passive monster. He just swims down the tunnel, essentially ignoring you as you beat him. You have to bring him to, like, almost death before he really cares about you, at least lore-wise. And honestly, it feels kind of bad. You're really only killing him because he's accidentally causing earthquakes. It's not his fault, he doesn't know, but we can't have the village destroyed. So it is a little bit sad that you're putting down such a beautiful creature, but they can get absolutely massively long, like ginormous, and they're incredibly majestic, and I really love Ceadeus. I think he's awesome. When you get to the final zone, which is this sort of underwater city, you can see like buildings lining the wall, and you actually start to fight him proper. In fact, a little bit of an Easter egg. The second chamber in the Kulve Taroth fight does look like a non-water-filled rocky version of this area. Whether it's a coincidence, I don't know, but it's potentially a cool little nod, right? And there is a subspecies of this giant whale, the gold-beard Ceadeus. Yep, it is shimmering gold, the beard of gold, the horn of gold. Basically, he was doing the whole gold thing before Mama Kulve got involved in this scene, and he is absolutely beautiful. So this is a Ceadeus that has, well, grown old, and the bioluminescent bacteria that it's got the relationship with have caused it to shine the shimmering gold color across the entire length of it. Its horns have also grown so much that they've covered its eyes, so it's essentially blind, though it lives in even deeper parts of the ocean where there wouldn't be much light apart from the light it's producing itself, so it probably doesn't matter too much. It can certainly still sense hunters, and it's a lot deadlier. It's still functionally the same. It's very similar to normal Cadiz, but it is slightly harder of a fight. It can do fancier things with the beam it can fire, and it has a few unique movements and attack patterns, but the main deal is it's so gold, which is fantastic. So, from one sea to another, yet now filled with sand.
I don't like sand.
Sorry, Anakin. So, this is quite literally a sand ocean, and swimming through its incredibly fine particles are a sand whale pair. The first one of which is Jhen Mohran. It is majestic to behold, and the experience of combating it, so you are sailing through the desert on these sand ships laden with siege equipment that still can't aim left or right, but you know, we don't need to worry about that, okay? I mean, I guess technically the ballista can, it's just the cannons that are still lagging a bit behind. It's got a Dragonator on the front because, of course, you always need a Dragonator, and outside of that, you're essentially a fleet of ships desperately trying to wrangle. Yeah, it is huge. When it leaps above you in the air over the boat, letting out its cry, it is one of the most like, just stop what you're doing, watch moments in Monster Hunter. Now, I really like this fight. It takes a while. A lot of people remember it being a snooze fest, but again, the very first time, it's amazing. See, that's the thing with these fights. It's the initial experience, the first hunt, that it's like, this is crazy and awesome. They're not designed to be, and it's hard to make them enjoyable over farming them for hundreds of hours, just by the nature of how lengthy and well thought out they are. There's always stages to them, right? You can't just smash it with speedrunny gear, although people have definitely done all of these in super quick times, but you know what I'm saying here. So, you have to use your siege equipment, damage it as much as you can. Eventually it will come close to the boat. You can leap on its back, start attacking at it. There is ore to be mined, and this thing feeds by just filtering sand through its mouth, and it filter feeds like a lot of baleen whales, and it just extracts the nutrients that it gets and then gets rid of the waste sand and rock and all of that outside of its blowhole, which also doubles us up as an attack. So it launches this debris into the air and then it lands on the ship and hits you, and it's just really irritating. It'll try and ram the ship, and essentially you just need to do what you can to bring it down, whether that's on its back hitting it manually or blasting it with the various siege weaponry. And then you will enter eventually the final showdown, where you can run up to it and beat on it manually. The sand ship is parked. I think park sand ships, right? And you can choose to stay on it and use the siege weaponry some more, and it'll try and finally finish off and mess up the boat. And essentially the reason this thing breaks its gentle giant nature, and honestly that's something that a lot of them share, they're too big to care or notice hunters. They're peaceful creatures most of the time. It's always an unfortunate event that provokes a confrontation, and it's honestly quite a sad affair laying these majestic creatures low. It really is. But Jhen unfortunately sees the sand ship as a potential rival, not quite distinguishing it as the, human ship that it is. So, well, a fight ensues. That, and everybody likes to be like, oh, there's a Jhen Mohran sighting, let's get in the desert, boys! Especially when it's the subspecies, the hallowed one, which is a crystalline version. It lives deeper in the sand, coming up for air at night, but it can hold its breath much longer than the other one down below in the deep sand dunes, and it's got this purple crystalline body. It's incredibly rare, and it causes quite a little hunting surge when it does appear, so that's really quite cool. But yeah, it is just essentially giant sand whale. You ride alongside it, damage it what you can in whoever ways, and eventually finish it off in a more personal battle. There is the Dah'ren Mohran, which is functionally the same fight. He's more aggressive, admittedly, and it is a shorter fight, although you could argue less tactical. I mean, I'm interested in people's opinions and memories, how rose-tinted goggles you are with these fights, but he is really much the same. He's just got a single jagged horn instead that's said to be able to pierce through anything. Okay, man, sure, yeah. Well, I can pierce through anything. It's clearly he wrote his own entry there. Yeah, essentially that's it. Granted, Kulve does take inspirations from all large monsters. There's a bit of Goggy, a bit of Arena, Dalmaduri, but I definitely think it's fair to say she is the latest in this series of monsters lines. The big epic encounter with proper scripted things happening that is amazing the first time and probably gets more and more tedious the longer you do it. Obviously, Kulve Taroth is continuing this tradition of a huge, generally docile monster that we're having to fight for some reason, though in this case we're kind of choosing to for research and fat loot purposes, but still, we eventually push her out of Area 1, which is the traditional siege equipment. She's mostly ignoring us, we're just beating on her. We force her to take us seriously as a threat, so she goes to Area 2, and then we start the fight proper. But what I love about this, outside of the beautiful design of the map, the verticality, how everything flows together, just the fact that it's brought to life in worlds so well, using what world lets them actually do now. And, oh god, I can't wait for future encounters like this. If this is what they've come up with for Treasure Dragon, imagine how this gets bigger and better as we go forward into G rank or Monster Hunter World 2 or however it happens. But the potential, but I love this fight because it's really well constructed and put together. Every area, each of the 4 phases feels like it could be its own monster. It's very slow to start with, it builds up, you're using what you can, dropping rocks, trying to get a couple bits of parts broken, but you're not really doing much, you're just annoying her in the first area, finding the tracks, incorporating that mechanic into it. You keep losing sight of her, and you're playing this little hide and seek game. It's really its own little microcosm, and it works beautifully well. Obviously the whole all 16 players, everyone contributing, making it easier on subsequent, this massive effort by everyone, a colossal investigation that adds to it, the whole gold aesthetic, the beautiful gold everywhere, the veins, the caverns of El Dorado. It just adds to this immersive massive fight that's like, yeah, this is so cool. And then when you move and she starts mollifying her gold and glowing with anger and the molten everywhere, and it looks amazing, and you get a mount, you can start being on the horn, maybe you chip it, she starts to get a little bit more aggressive, rolling around the place, her beam attacks are beautiful to behold, and you start breaking off more and more clumps of gold from her, and things start to get a little bit more serious, and then you move deeper into the cavern, and now the environment takes place, the lava bubbles dropping the stalactites on her, she gets a little bit more desperate, a little bit more angry, her attacks are a little bit faster, she's more furious, you're really getting through her now, you probably fully chip the horn, and then you manage to release her, fully revealing the creature underneath, now much more agile, freed from the burden of the gold, melting through the wall in the most beautiful cascade of molten gold. Oh, that is honestly, the molten gold melt wall slide is probably the single most beautiful thing I've ever seen in Monster Hunter. It is gorgeous to behold, and I just stopped and had to watch the first time I say, like, honestly. And now you're fighting her desperate to survive. She is super agile, she's super aggressive, she is all about the place, sending literal rivers of molten gold at you, tinting the whole final area red as the ceiling drips with liquid gold, and you use the central pillar, desperately jump at her, try and get those horns. She is so much faster with her tail whips and swipes, and she starts hitting so damn hard, and the pools of gold, if you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, you just burn to death, and eventually the best we can do is cleave her horn off, and she goes scurrying away. I do think we're doing it deliberately, because we don't know if there's more than one, we don't want to kill her, you know, research, we want to do preserve life. The guild, believe it or not, is on the side of nature. I do want to do a lore video again on the guild, but it is on the side of nature. I think we're deliberately letting her live, if only to grow back another gold shell, or I say grow, find and place, so we can come and loot her again. But yeah, it is so expertly done. It's not too difficult. It feels like an actual fight instead of just you're wailing on a huge health bar. It still has all of the beats that the previous ones has, but they've combined essentially everything that makes World great in terms of hunting monsters into one multi-stage magnificent encounter, and I am in love with it. We'll see what it's like after the honeymoon period is over, but yeah, I thought it'd be interesting to take you guys through everything that kind of paved the golden way for Kulve Taroth. Let me know if you enjoyed this, like if you did, subscribe for more, share it around if you had fun, and I will see you next time. Oh, goodbye.
Rage Gaming with the video float.
But that's all that's really relevant at the mo, but I'm still gonna leave this up so you patrons know that I love you, even though the outro's no longer that kind of relevant. But the new one's being worked on, and it's gonna be a truly badass song, and don't worry, I won't be doing any rapping on it. I'm gonna go now. This was shit.